I think a lot of that changes because, it's like Michael Singer in The Untethered Soul, to thy own self be true. He opens up the book talking about that. He goes, well, what self are we talking about?
Exactly.
The scared one, the insecure one, the confident one. I mean, we
the dad self, the entrepreneurial self, the CEO self, the athlete self, the which self.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, there's many reasons why I really like you. And one of them is that you're very much a protector of your people. And when I first started building the Peak Athlete back in 1997, and I'm totally an accidental entrepreneur. And I like saying that to people because I think there's a lot of stories out there that someone was so deliberate and so focused and they grew and they scaled this business and they got into it. And it was accidental. It happened on a football field because I got done playing college football and I was volunteering at a high school in Edmonton, Alberta, where I lived at the time. And I was working with the defensive backs and I was just really good at teaching them the mental game stuff more than anything because I played college football. I was a nationally ranked badminton player, but I'm not physically gifted. I'm not 6'4" and 245 pounds of solid muscle or something.
Right.
And I had two older brothers who, helped me develop my mental toughness, as any older brothers do. And so these kids started getting some really good results, not just on the field, but actually in the classroom, because I was actually teaching them a little bit about how their brain worked for as much information was available back then. And a mom, Deb, said, hey, Kirby's getting such great results. Would you mind mentoring him more or coaching him more? And I was like, yeah, sure, love to. And there was this long pause and she leans in and she's like, how much do you want to charge, Todd? And I said, how about $75 for a package of 3 sessions? And she was like, and I was vomiting in my mouth when I was saying, because who's going to pay me that much just to talk to a kid and teach him some stuff? And she's like, done. And so that was my rate for the first 3 years. Was I was super cheap, but it got me a lot of reps.
Right.
And so I say that because when I started out, I was now trying to learn as much as I could about the inner game of things. And typically that would lead you to psychology books. And I just was like, I'm a practical guy. I grew up on a farm and ranch. If my dad ever found an idea that was crap, he would say, well, that dog won't hunt, and so I started diving into other things like biology and kinesiology and all these other disciplines. And I started making way more sense of this world of human performance. And I say that because one of the key platforms of the world of psychology back then was that people who had one self had the lowest rates of depression or depressive or anxiety disorders. Well, that didn't make any sense to me because here I have got clients and I'm like, we don't want that guy who's out there playing football coming off the field and acting that way in society.
Right.
That's a different self.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, that makes sense. He's using a specific set of qualities and attributes to go out there and help him perform. So I was like, well, that's a good example of how the world of psychology is full of crap.
Yeah.
And so then in 2007, basically the psychology world had a complete flip on really 3 of their core founding principles about how human beings operate. And one of them is that now one of the largest fields of study for the world of psychology is many selves, is that humans who actually operate through and see themselves as having many sides of who they are actually have the lowest rates of anxiety and stress disorder. And the reason I say that is because so many people nowadays get caught up in the social media vernacular of authenticity and authentic self, thinking that there's one you, and there is not.
Yeah.
Because if we learn anything from the universe, is we're energy.
Right.
So at our core, we're really energy. And then we transmute that energy through the roles that we play. And so really the message in my book is more about using our creative imagination to intentionally bring forward who it is that you want to bring to these different roles that you have in your life so that you can perform the way that you want to perform.
Yeah.
And perform isn't in a fake way. It's because performance at the end of the day is just your ability to get results. So anyways, and the reason I brought all that up is because you're very similar when it comes to marketing principles. You like to poke holes in things and, point people in the right direction towards what actually is going to work for them.
Yeah, just trying to be useful and trying to
Exactly.
help. I like the idea of a result leader is far more valuable than a thought leader because any idiot could come up with thoughts, or many people.
Damn it! Now I got to change the head title on my about page. Remove thought leader.
Oh,
Hey team, if you're listening, remove thought leader immediately.
Well, there are thought leaders, and I understand the way people describe it, but there's a lot of thought leaders that steal their thoughts from other people, and what you're saying makes me think of, so in What's in It for Them, my latest book, I talk about their situational behavior. And then there's situational ethics. Situational behavior changes.
So good.
Like we can, I'll tell a dirty joke to you, maybe here, maybe live, or maybe, but if you introduce me to your grandma, I'm not going to say the same joke, but I'm not going to.
She would love it though.
She probably would, yeah.
She would have loved it.
So, but the point is, and one of the things I talk about, most people have, not everyone, but most people have drank beer. Most people have gone to church, but you rarely drink beer in church. Some people probably do. But there's situational behavior, but there's situational ethics. And me and you have had lots of conversations about IP. And what I really like about you, since we're both here edifying each other, is that you very much respect IP. You very much respect, and we live in a world of authors and speakers and
creators. Yeah. The creator economy of taking other people's stuff and making yourself look really smart.
Yeah, and it's annoying. There's Zig Ziglar, who has said some great things. I mean, I remember sitting on a couch with Zig in the early '90s for an hour while he was speaking at this big event, and we were backstage, and I literally spent an hour talking to Zig Ziglar, and then I sat through a hour-and-a-half presentation of an infomercial company sitting down there pitching him. And Zig kept saying to me, "What do you think? What do you think?" And I was like this young guy just early in the marketing. And so, Zig, great speaker. And he had a line where he said, "You can get anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want."
Yeah.
The challenge, though, is that's not always true. It depends on who you help get what they want. Because you can help other people get what they want that some will not do a damn thing for you, and others will lie to you, abuse you, steal from you, betray you. And that's one of the difficulties of if you're a giver and if you go out there trying to just be helpful to people, is you have to boundary yourself. And unfortunately, we usually don't learn how to boundary ourselves until you get taken advantage.
Yep.
And so I try to warn people that if you're going to be a giver, just know that it comes with the territory. You become a target for takers, because the narcissists, the sociopaths, the psychopaths, the takers of the world, they have an ability to sense and identify who they can get something from.
Yeah.
And they can mirror empathy even though they may not have any real empathy.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. So we've had conversations about that. So as it relates to the alter ego, then let's talk about all the stuff that you help people with: imposter syndrome, how do they view themselves, what their identity. I mean, there's many places we can start. I don't think there's one right place to start, but let's first let's get to the definition. What does alter mean? What does ego mean?
Yeah.
What is an alter ego?
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about, because my goal for today is anyone watching or listening is that you get a domino from this. You get some perspective and some insight that really gives you a way to improve your life. And that may be your business, that may be your family, that may be your health. There's a lot of stuff, and you're really skilled, and that's what you help people do. So,
well, I mean, to kick off too, I always say, does everyone need an alter ego? No, they don't. But what I do know is that with all of the most successful people that I've been around, or even reflecting on my own life, the more valuable tools that you have in your tool belt that you can grab and pull out when you need to, you're going to be able to skate through life and over challenges or friction a lot more quickly or more gracefully than others who get caught up in something. And so I think that the method itself and using alter egos or identity to chunk it up to another level is a really powerful tool that someone can utilize. So going back to your first question, alter ego, it was actually coined in 44 BC by Cicero. And Cicero is kind of widely regarded as the greatest Roman statesman and philosopher to ever live. And a friend of his had basically sent him a letter asking him about advice on life now that he's this seasoned professional. And while he was going on this one caravan, he replied, and in it he coined the alter ego term, and it means the other I or trusted friend within. And he basically is unpacking how throughout his life he's had to reinvent himself. And he would use basically the quote from Epictetus, who said, adopting the manners and characteristics of others, there's nothing false in it. We all need a point of reference to start with. And so adopting those manners from others and borrowing their traits as your own only helps you to develop the vision of what you're trying to become. Basically breaking up his quote in some way. So that's useful to think about because you especially, Joe, with the Genius Network, and I was, speaking about you with someone last night, and, they were saying, just as I would, that you truly do have one of the greatest Rolodexes that's out there, to use an old term, for people. But when I say greatest Rolodexes, it's not just the quantity of people in it, it's the quantity of people who have deep affection for you that are also in that. And that's extraordinarily difficult to reach. So you're doing a lot of things right. You should probably write a book on it. Oh, wait, you did.
Yeah.
So we all know the power of having great people around us, great friends, great peers, great coaches or mentors, great people to mastermind with or network with. But we don't think about necessarily how can we bring that tribe of friends and mentors into our own minds and the 6 inches in between. And so that's really what Cicero is saying. It's the other I, your trusted friend within. And I would carry it a step further. It's the trusted friends within. So that's the kind of base concept that's there. The other principles that kind of I talk about that I discovered in building the alter egos and the secret identities of so many athletes or leaders is that one of the core things that makes it work so well is that it brings an attitude of playfulness to it.
Right.
And I'll just share a little bit of science. From the ages of 6.5 months or 6 months to 7 years of age, roughly in a child, they are basically operating in the theta brainwave state. Okay, This is all stuff that you would know a lot. You got beta, you got alpha, then you got theta. Beta is like our waking mind. It's the awareness mind. Alpha is like, some deeper focus that you've got working on a task or something. And then theta is really deep creative focus. And it's where the zone and flow state typically sits as well. Right. So you've got children that are in the zone and flow state most of the time. And that's what, to the parent that's listening, that's why when you yell, hey, supper time, and they don't come and you're 9 times you've yelled it and they still don't come, it's because literally they're just so caught up in the play and the process of what they're doing because their brainwave state is in theta. Well, why is that? Well, that's because unlike a baby elephant who needs to get up and fend for itself immediately in the savannah, human beings don't. Mm-hmm. And we've got a lot to learn. So we're like little sponges at that age. We're just soaking everything up. There's no concept of me and myself and my identity at that age, right? Because there is no me. It's just I'm a part of this family, or like everything is mine, or whatever.
Doing your thing.
And so because they don't have an identity, they're able to shapeshift so well. They're playing nurse 1 second, teacher, jumping off the couch as Superman or Wonder Woman or Batman or Thor or whatever, going out front to play with as their favorite basketball player or football player or whatever. They're just adopting these traits. And it's because everything in the world is big. I'm not as tall as you, Joe, and so I want to be big like you.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video, and I want to let you know that I have a new book that's come out, and if you'd like to get it absolutely free, there's a link below in the description, or you can wait till the end of this video, or you can simply go to joesfreebook.com and you can get a copy there.
And then at the age of 7.5 or 8 years of age, depending on gender, then you're all of a sudden frontal lobe starts to kick in, reasoning skills. You start, wait, there's me and I'm separate from these people. So you start to develop this sense of an identity and you start to think, I want to be more like the 12-year-old. And you start acting like the 12-year-old and you start leaving behind all this creative, playful self. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing I love about you. Even inside of your office here, there's so much, crazy shit, really.
Crazy shit, yeah. I want to see how you describe all this.
Yeah, I'm not going to pull any punches. There's a ton of crazy. You got a very unique set of art curation that you've got. But it's beautiful that way. Yeah. So I say that because a grounding principle that makes this work so well is when you're really playful, it removes ego from the process. And when I can remove ego from part of this process of helping an athlete perform, or a leader or a CEO, entrepreneur, dad, mom, whatever, they can fall into and find more of their capabilities and traits and perform up to whatever is nested within inside of themselves.
So, yeah, that's very interesting. So do you find yourself dismantling, maybe that's the wrong word, but you're certainly taking a look at their identity and how they behave, and you're giving them another perspective, and you're giving them a methodology to step out of themselves if they become so damn serious. Because and you even write about, you write about this in your book, people lose the playfulness of being a kid. And there are the few individuals that become, more playful, and they become more engaged in life. And that, to me, is such an important thing to offer that. And I think that's what your methodology actually provides. Is it gives people like, man, you're stuck. You can be very financially successful and hate your life. And you could be, if you're starving and have no means, that's a whole nother situation.
Exactly.
But human happiness has very little to do with the external. It has to do with the internal, unless the external is you're in a war-torn country, or you're just in constant,
fight or flight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, okay.
So do I find people and dismantle that current identity so that we can rebuild the new identity? There's a danger in that for me, because I am not a therapist, right? And this is what we see nowadays is, listen, I don't try to solve all your problems, right? I'm wholly unskilled at that. I'm very good at helping people move forward and do, the performance coaching that we do and using the methods. But the nature of navigating between the 6 inches of people's ears for 27 years is sometimes you poke a sore spot and there's a trauma that's there. And while in that moment, I'll let them share or whatever, I'll always point them in the direction of what is, 5 incredibly world-class experts on treating trauma or depression or whatever it might be there. But at the same time, none of my clients are able to move themselves to the sidelines for the next 3 years and get themselves fixed. They still have to go and do their thing. So if that's the case, how about I give you some tools to help you navigate this with less stress, less anxiety, and let me help you disassociate from the current story that you've got about what you think you can or cannot do, or let me disassociate away from the way that you think you need to be doing this. No, Todd, the way that I get results is I am a hard charger. This is the way that I work. Or I found over the years that many of my athletes especially found that they would actually not get treatment on some of their, past issues because they felt like that was what gave them their edge. They don't want to lose their edge. If I give this thing up, then am I really going to be able to go out there and kill it on that court or crush it on that field or something like that? And I'm like, yeah, you 100% can, because it's not removing your capability.
Yeah, there's a famous, it reminds me of a famous philosopher, I can't remember his name, he said something along the lines of the last thing that a human ever gives up is their suffering. And a lot of people, I think, that hold on to I don't want to lose the edge or what, it's almost like a drug addict that'll be like, yeah, I make great music when I'm, because if they get sober, their music is going to suck. Not always.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and Alfred Adler, one of the founders of basically the world of psychology, his frame on the human experience is always we're doing everything because it helps us achieve a goal. Whether it's a negative one or there's something that's there that it's helping you achieve some sort of goal. And people are like, I don't want the goals, or I don't want this world. And I'm like, no, it's most likely there's some sort of goal that it is accomplishing for you, whether it's the attention that you would get from it or, you re-experiencing the pain because you associate yourself as having someone who's just, I live a pained life,
Right. My friend Anna Lemke, who wrote, Dr. Anna Lemke, Dopamine Nation.
Yeah.
She writes about, S&M and bondage, and she writes about pain. And there is a dopamine hit that comes from pain. And so everything is people, what humans want is they want more woo or less ah.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes the woo comes through doing exciting, healthy things. Other times the woo comes from consuming sugar, taking drugs, having sex, watching porn, and there's consequences to all the different ways we get woo and ah. I get in cold plunges almost daily, and because when I get out, I feel better. But getting in is like, but the woo that comes out of it is worth doing.
Yeah.
And so the challenge is when you have a pained existence, but your patterns, your reward system, your identity is attached to that. And so, and I mean, because how would you describe the learning? Because one of the things I say, and this is my interpretation of it through having been in recovery for 2 decades, from drug addiction, sex addiction, workaholism, is that unlearning is more important than learning, because I'm constantly trying to learn stuff. And at the same time, I'm trying to unlearn things that my brain has convinced me this is the right way to say things. This is the right way to think about stuff, when no, that actually isn't serving me, and that's not really helpful at all. And so how would you look at unlearning versus learning?
So like my frame for my world is peak performance is more a process of subtraction, removal, and deletion, right? So like someone comes to me and they say, okay, well, that's where I want to go. I want to climb that mountain, or I want to get up that hill, or that's my next hurdle to go over top of. And then I kind of take a peek in their backpack and I'm like, oof, you're carrying why do you have a washing machine on your back? That seems kind of unnecessary for this trip. So I'm constantly looking at, no, we can remove this. We don't need to do this anymore. And some of that's because we're so close to our own self that, well, let's use business as the example, because this is probably a very popular podcast amongst people who are in business and entrepreneurship.
A lot of entrepreneurs.
So the way that most of us had to get started is we had to hustle our faces off. Right. And we were doing a lot of stuff ourselves. It's the chief bottle washer and mop pusher in the office, as well as sales and marketing and finance or whatever. And most of them were doing terrible, but a couple of them were pretty good at. And so then we get our business to a certain level. Let's just say we're at $1 million and we got a few team members now. But we get into this now routine and habit of lots of stuff. We got to do lots of stuff. Like that's, in order for us to keep on surviving, which is really the nature of $0 to about $300,000 a year in business. There's a lot of studies that are done on this. That's kind of the phase of hustle your face off to figure out what's working, find your right market or niche or whatever. But then in all of that paint that you just threw against the wall, there's a kind of small little picture that's there that is going to be where you're going to focus your attention on to get you to the next milestone of, like, say, $3 million. And so what now the process is we need to unshackle from the hustlepreneur or the founder that started there. And now we need to move into creating security and stability. So it's less projects, more systems and refinement and optimizing things. And that's a different identity. That's a CEOing type identity. Right. And that also demands, both of them demand discipline and consistency of showing up, especially consistency. Now it's the discipline of run your plays that you've created. Run your plays and refine those plays, get better at running those plays. And so I say that because when people come to me and I'm looking in their backpack and I'm like, oh, you know what we need to throw out? It's you.
Right.
It's this identity, because this isn't just who you are. Like me, we'll talk about this in a bit. This is going to be the Easter egg for people, or it's the open loop of talking about uniforms and totems and artifacts. So stay till the end, everyone. I just wanted to get my radio voice in once.
No, that was good. That was quite good.
But so I've got a pair of glasses on right now. This is just part of my work uniform. These are non-prescription glasses, everybody. I've been wearing them since 1997 when I first started. And I had to build out my
Not those same pair.
No.
That's pretty damn good.
It would be really good. Yeah. But as my mother knows, I'm very good at leaving glasses behind.
So you have a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, I've donated Ray-Bans and Maui gyms around the world.
Wow.
So I should sign them from now on. So, but in the nature of the work that I do, Joe, I'm working with high achieving people, and I don't just do coaching because I have, group mentoring, and then I create training programs, and I'm also, CEO of the company and stuff like that. Although my wife is taking over, thankfully. But is that me showing up, being a challenger with like big personalities? Is that really who I am? It's not really who I am. It's not all of me, let's say. It's a useful identity for me to bring to that role that I have as a coach for these people.
Right.
And it could be so easy for me to believe that that's who I am because that's the muscle that I flex every single day for 8 hours or 10 hours some days and have been doing it since 1997. But is that challenger persona really going to help me be a good dad? It's not. Because kids have more willpower than parents. They will keep on fighting you and breaking you down. Right. And so I'm very much more inspired with that role in my life to be more like my father and Mr. Rogers. Mm. And so before Molly was born in 2013, I rewatched a lot of Mr. Rogers stuff. And if you watch him, you'll see how anytime he's communicating with a kid, he always gets down on their level. And he's always, a lot of times, got his hands, resting on his knee. Very passive stance, very welcoming stance, or body language that's there. Because he doesn't want it to be confrontational.
Right.
And it's pretty hard to argue with the fact that, the man left a pretty indelible mark on at least American culture, right?
Oh, yeah. And I remember early on how many people, when I was a kid, would make fun of him and think he's goofy and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And now you look back and you just see how effective and respected that guy was.
Yeah. Tom Hanks even said when he was playing him in the interview with Jimmy Kimmel, I play it when I'm keynoting. When I got asked to play this role, I thought, he's weird. He's like, I never really grew up around Mr. Rogers. I saw him, but I was like, he's just a weirder guy. And then, like any good character, I got to do my research. So he watched, I think it was 78 episodes of Won't You Be My Neighbor? And, Mr. Rogers, he's got his uniform. He'd come in, take off his outdoor shoes, put on his blue sneakers, and he'd put on that cardigan.
Right.
And he kind of said a few more nice words about Mr. Rogers. And then he said to Jimmy Kimmel, when you put on that red sweater and those blue shoes, you feel powerful. And Jimmy Kimmel says, really? He's like, yeah, it's like putting on Batman's cape and cowl. You feel powerful. And that goes into like
that's one of the alter ego effect.
Well, that's one element of the method that I developed around why it's so important to use a uniform, a totem, an artifact to help you ritualize this identity. Because we have this naturally occurring phenomenon inside of our minds called enclothed cognition, which is that we as human beings attribute story and meaning to the artifacts and the clothing that we all wear. So what happens though is if you were to put on a doctor's coat, you will actually, without you even having to even specifically think about this, you will enclose your mind in the cognitive traits and abilities of the meaning of that white coat.
Right.
Which means most people in our culture attribute being detailed, methodical, smart, successful to someone wearing a white doctor's coat, okay? For the most part. Other people might not, but that's for the most part. So what happens then is when you put on the white coat, if you were to do an activity that demands being detailed, smart, and methodical, you will actually improve your performance without you going to a class, right, without you working on it. So when if Tom Hanks put on that red sweater and blue shoes before he watched those 78 episodes, would he have felt powerful? No, he would have felt like a goof.
Right.
because that was his association to Mr. Rogers, red sweater, blue shoes, goofball. Changed his meaning of it. Now when he put it on, I felt powerful. And he started to live through the traits and abilities and qualities of the man that he saw on that TV. So coming back to me, that's how I want it to be around my kids. Now, does that make me successful every single second of it? No. But if I can improve myself 20% of the time, that's a pretty damn big impact to my 3 little kids.
Right.
Which is the most important role I could ever play in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to make this distinction here just for people that have not read the book, because you cover this. The glasses thing. Were you wearing glasses inspired? You write about this in the book by Martin Luther King?
So, no, I did not know about Martin Luther King. So the story for Martin is I was doing, and it's great because you know George Raveling?
No.
So George Raveling, in the movie about Nike, when they're trying to get Michael Jordan to sign, they famously go down to, I think it's LA, and they meet with George Raveling, who's an absolute legend in the world of basketball. Like, he's been basically Nike's basketball ambassador for the last 40 years.
Okay, so I think I know the character.
Okay, yeah, and I'd be surprised if you didn't come across George. Amazing man. He stood right behind Martin Luther King when he delivered the I Have a Dream speech, okay? And when MLK got done the speech, he handed it to George. And George was a basketball player at Villanova at the time. I believe he was a basketball player, or is he assistant coach? One of the two. And so he had it, and he still has it. So it's insured and all these kinds of things. But when I told this story to George, he was like, no way, that's not true. And here's the story. So I was doing a speech in San Antonio, Texas in 2004 at this leadership event. And I talked about, my talk was about developing this new crop of leaders, millennials at the time. Because I had so much experience doing some like mental game coaching with these people. So I had some different points of view and insights. But I shared on stage about the power of developing an identity. And I talked about when I first started my business, I was deeply insecure about how young I looked. I looked like I was 12, even though I was 21. And here I am talking about the inner game and mental toughness. But I don't have 4 best-selling books, Joe. And I don't have 7 letters behind my name. You know, we all place these rules in our head about when can we become an authority or something on talking about a topic.
Right.
And I didn't really position myself as an authority. I just wanted to get a message out to people, which was how to develop the triune athlete, the mentally, emotionally, and physically tough athlete. And when you align all 3 of those things together, you can unpack performance onto that field of play, whatever that might be. Ice, court, whatever. But I wasn't making the calls, Joe. I would go to bed every night. I'm going to make 7 phone calls tomorrow and book me some speeches or something. And I would end that day and I wouldn't have made those speeches. And I would beat the shit out of myself and judge myself and feel so much shame over, like, do you even want this, Todd? Like, you know, you say that this is so important, but you're not doing it. And I watched an episode of Oprah as I was procrastinating the next day. And it turned out it's Oprah's favorite episode. And it's this episode with Johnny Jocks. And this lady stands up in the audience. And what happens is Johnny recounts the story of Oprah doing one of her auctions of all of her clothing. And Johnny talks about how she couldn't afford any of Oprah's stuff other than a pair of shoes. So she bought a pair of Oprah's shoes. And she was going through a very hard time, and she placed Oprah's shoes in the corner of her room. And whenever she felt like she maybe couldn't make it through that day, she would go and stand in Oprah's shoes. And I thought to myself in that moment, wait, I used an alter ego when I played football. It was Geronimo. And it was the composite of Walter Payton and Ronnie Lott, my 2 heroes in football, and 5 Native American warriors, where I grew up, our farm and ranch in Alberta, Canada. It's kind of rich with some Native American history. And so I've always been deeply connected to that world. And I took Geronimo on that field. You thought you were playing against the scrawny little number 17, but no, you were coming up against my tribe of 8. That's what I called it. Me and my 7. Gotcha. And man, I played way better than I could have if I was doing it on my own. Now, Geronimo, though, wasn't custom built to help me win in business. And so I built Super Richard. Super Richard was Superman, Joseph Campbell, and Benjamin Franklin. Those 3 people specifically, because I wanted Superman's decisiveness, because I was not being decisive. I was a man of inaction, not the man of action. And I fell in love with Joseph Campbell when he was on Bill Moyer's PBS special, talking about the hero's journey. And I just, I was 13 at the time, I think, and I fell in love with how this man articulated himself.
Right.
And so I wanted to be more articulate because I was talking about a message, and I think I said 14,000 words before I said the 7 words that were really the value proposition of what I was doing. And then I wanted to be more like Benjamin Franklin because I just felt like he was one of the most confident humans that ever lived, because he had like 8 legendary careers in one lifetime.
Right.
And so I wanted to be more confident because I was not confident. I was so insecure. And then I went to LensCrafters, which is like an eye optometry store in Canada. I went to West Edmonton Mall, which was the largest mall in the world at the time, and I bought a pair of non-prescription glasses. I had to convince the lady to sell them to me because back then everyone was getting LASIK eye surgery, right? No one was getting glasses for Warby Parker sells nowadays. And so finally I got these glasses, and I went home and I did my reverse Clark Kent. I put on the glasses just like he would take off the glasses to, put on the cape, essentially.
Right.
And so I became Super Richard, and Super Richard was built to be the advocate for my stuff. And now when you think about the other eye or trusted friend within, there's all this stuff wasn't very explicit at the time. I was doing anything that I could to just try and get to my next goal. Right? This business wasn't going to go anywhere at $75 for a package of 3 sessions. And I wanted to get on stages. I wanted to, talk to young kids about, developing their mental toughness. And Super Richard was hired specifically to be my sales guy and to get out there and be my advocate. And so when I put on those glasses, I was not Todd. I was Super Richard, and Super Richard was very confident in selling Todd's stuff because he believed in Todd. And I say that because that absolutely saved me, because, I come from a traumatic past where I had some very deep wounds from some stuff that happened to me as a kid. And I had a hard time believing in Todd because of the stuff that happened. And Super Richard came along to, be my advocate.
Let's talk about confidence and courage. I just as a jumping off point, and we can riff on that for a bit. So, Dan Sullivan has that story when he was he was a cadet in the Army, and they had like 60 of them, and they were having to do during that time in the world. He was born in 1944, so this was in the 60s, I guess. He was with 60 of the other cadets, and the boot camp obstacle course that they were running through had barbed wire and trenches. They had to go through mud and water, all kinds of, just obstacles they had to go through. And they used real bullets at the time, and they would shoot real bullets over their head. And they said, you have to stay low, because if you lift your head up, you could get shot in the head and die. And so Dan is explaining this story, and he said, the sergeant asked, how many of you are scared? And no one except Dan raised his hand and said that he was scared. And he said, the only person here telling the truth is, Cadet Sullivan or whatever. And he said, so Dan says, he learned the difference between fear and courage. He said, fear is peeing your pants, and courage is doing what you need to do with wet pants. And so in order for us to get to confidence, we often have to operate with courage. So in my book, I talk quite a bit about how to align yourself with the right people. There's that Zig Ziglar line, which is, you can have anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. But my friend Martin Howie, when he had stage 4 cancer, came over to my office, and he said, a lot of people say these lines, like, people don't want a drill, they want a hole. Or you can get anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. He goes, but the problem is those things are often wrong, because sometimes people buy a drill not because they want a hole, they want to stir paint, because there's other things that you can do with a drill other than drill a hole. So maybe they don't want a hole, maybe they want, paint to be stirred. And he said the same thing with, you can help other people get what they want, that won't do a damn thing for you.
And that's true. Like all of us have been in situations where we've really helped others get what they want that not only didn't help us at all, they oftentimes took advantage and oftentimes abuse you and rip you off and betray you. And what happens is when you're a giver, you can become jaded by being a good human, doing the right thing. Like everyone thinks they're doing the right thing. Even when people are doing the wrong things, most people think they're right. So it takes an enormous amount of awareness to realize that even when you think you're right, you could be totally wrong. That's another discussion. But the thing is, most people think they're right. And that whole line, people judge themselves on their intentions, they judge others on their actions. So, when the actions of you being a giver and helping someone intentionally followed with action, and then someone takes advantage of you, it can leave you in a very dark place. So when you become hurt or you have your heart broken, you become betrayed, you can put up walls to connecting with other people. And oftentimes when someone wants something from you and they're so persuasive to the point of physical assertiveness, or you feel like, man, I don't know how to escape this sort of situation, that's where we have to be able to muster courage and either set boundaries. Now, preferably, if we do this in advance, you have less of those sort of difficult situations to get in with people that are half, not people that are elf, easy, lucrative, and fun versus hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. So what I wanted to talk with you guys about as it relates to this, since you're talking about courage, how do you muster or develop the ability to resource yourself to fight when you need to fight back, run away when you need to run away, ask for help when you need to ask for help? Because a lot of times when I was a dead broke entrepreneur struggling, none of this shit was fun. I didn't have an elf business. It wasn't enjoyable. I didn't know how to do marketing. I didn't know any of this stuff. And I had to wake up every day and muster as much courage as I could to drag myself through the war that I somehow was in. When I was going through addiction recovery, none of it was enjoyable. It sucked. And when you're doing withdrawals or you're trying to, overcome, the consequences of just life, danger, etc., it's very difficult. So I'd love to get your take, Don, on accessing courage so that we can function in those times when we need it. Because if whatever you fear and don't face controls you. Whatever you fear and take steps to face, you can control it or at least get better at it. And that oftentimes requires courage. And I don't think anyone here would disagree that operating with courage doesn't feel good. Operating with confidence does feel good. So to go back to the skill, when you got the skill, there's a flow that's there. When you don't, you're going to have to kind of muster this internal resourcefulness. So I'd love to get your take on that and anything you would say to this, Dean, also, or anyone here. I'm totally open to hear what everyone else has to say about it, because I think courage right now is really needed in the world, especially with givers, because there's a lot of freaking takers out there.
Well, my thought on courage is if it's a life-threatening, what Dan was going through situation, it makes total sense that he would feel fear, right? Yeah. That's not a lack of courage. That's just the brain saying, we may get our head shot off, right? So courage, you got to still operate even though you're afraid. And what they say, courage is not the absence of fear, right? It's operating in spite of fear. Mm-hmm. But when I work with a golfer, I don't need them to feel fear because there's nothing on the golf course. That's what I explained to them. What are you afraid of on a golf course? There's nothing. There's nothing life-threatening, but they make it into life-threatening because they start seeing the bunker, they start seeing the water, they start seeing the trees, and that attracts their attention. And now it becomes a lion. And that's what I said is if you think that way, you're going to create all kinds of fears, but there's nothing at your skill level that you can't do. So again, courage is not something that would be absent just because you have skill, especially if it's life-threatening. You have to operate in spite of it.
That's good.
So I used to tell myself, Don, the I would imagine that everything we're seeing is just a holodeck. That none of that, the ball is sitting on one little patch of the ground, and you're standing on that ground. The ball's not moving. Nobody's yelling at you. No, there's no threat physically. You could set up exactly the way you need to. You know how to swing, and the sight of that water or that stuff in your eye line, that's not affecting anything that you're having to do here. It's all it's going to fly through the air, and it's going to land precisely the distance that that club is going to go when you swing the way that you need to swing. It's just so funny how we psych ourselves out like that.
Well, the skill level of golf, it's the hardest sport I've ever played, because the best explanation I heard is somebody said to me one time, think about having a nail tapped into the wall. Now take a hammer and swing as hard as you can and drive that nail straight into the wall.
Mm-hmm.
That takes skill. You wouldn't be able to do it the first few times. It would take a long time. The guy who said that to me, Hawk Harrelson, is the announcer of the White Sox.
Mm-hmm.
He says it's also the equivalent of playing Major League Baseball and hitting every ball over second base.
Uh-huh.
How hard would that be? Right. And so the difficulty, and that's what I always try to explain to these guys, at your level, there isn't anything you can't do. They're so skilled. When you go out and play with these guys, the thing that's funny is people look at these guys and they say, well, I could go out and play. They don't play the same courses we do. When they go out onto a professional course, it is set up completely different than what the amateurs are playing. The rough is longer, the greens are faster, the pins are in tougher places. They're playing, like Tiger Woods said, he said, if you're a single digit handicap and you play some of the courses we play, you'd have trouble breaking 100.
That's the truth. I played Sawgrass, the last round that you could play before the tournament, and then they tore down the clubhouse, and the rough was, you go in that, and that rough is punitive. I mean, it's like,
and they get out of it like it's nothing.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And we just could take 3 shots to get out.
Yeah.
Right. It's funny listening to you guys talk about golf. So Dean has this great golf analogy about how he works, where he likes golf. I always say it's like, George Carlin, it's a waste of real estate, but he there's so much more you could do with that land. But anyway, Dean is like, why do I like playing golf? So he came up with an acronym, which is G stands for goal, O stands for, and I remember all this shit. O stands for optimal environment, L stands for limited distractions, and F stands for fixed time frame. And so Dean set up a house where he calls it his evil scheme hatchery, where he goes and has a whiteboard and a chair, and he doesn't have technology in the room. If he wants to bring in a laptop or a phone, he could do that, but he has it free of like computers and stuff, unless he wants to bring stuff in. And there's this whiteboard, so it's like a blank space where he can do his entrepreneurial art, which in his case is thinking. And he goes and plays golf, so he gives himself a goal. He creates an optimal environment to do it in. He has limited distractions there. That's why there's no technology and stuff there, unless he chooses to bring it in. And then a fixed time frame where he'll go in and, he's like, I play golf because I can go through 18 holes in 3.5, 4 hours or whatever. I don't ever play golf, so I don't really know this stuff. But, it's a good thing. We actually did an I Love Marketing episode on how how to go play golf in your own life and apply that.
Just posted up. There's a YouTube video called the 50-minute focus finder, and it's right there. Gina posted it up in the chat.
Yeah, and that's from years ago too. That was one of our very first episodes when we started doing I Love Marketing in 2010. Let me ask you guys something, because this is what's kind of going through my head at the moment. And this may sound a little weird. What I'm noticing,
I like it already.
Yeah, I was at the edge of our.
I like it already.
But
yeah, like the setup here, a little cliffhanger. So when you think of the term meant for more, if you just think of more, if you look at meant, meaning, what you're trying to do, the people that seem to be engaged are engaged in something, and it's usually right now of service or helping or art or creativity or exercise or some entrepreneurial endeavor, some pursuit of something that they are trying to master, having to handle something that they didn't handle before, and now all of a sudden, either by volunteering of their own choice or being forced into it, people are either pushed into, like, to use my buddy Stephen Pressfield, who wrote the book The War of Art, resistance. Whenever you hit it doesn't take an enormous amount of effort to do something that's a lower level activity. But if you're going to pursue a 12-step program, write a book, start an entrepreneurial enterprise, start a yoga practice, you're going to get hit with resistance. And I think right now,
pants, right?
What's that?
Wear pants.
Exactly. These higher consciousness activities like putting on pants every day. And so what I spent about an hour and a half last night talking to Jay Abraham, and I said, the opening of the documentary that one of my clients put together for me, which is my movie Connected, which is the Joe Polish story. It's not even out yet, but people can watch the trailer at connectedthemovie.com. And one of the first things I say at the beginning of the movie is this Charles Bukowski, the crazy alcoholic poet who was a brilliant writer. He said, it was along the lines of take the writer away from the typewriter and all you have left is a sickness which started him writing in the first place. And it's kind of an interesting thing because, I tend to apply that to entrepreneurs. Take the entrepreneur away from business and all you have left is a sickness which got them starting the business in the first place. Now, saying it in a way of like we are all spending our ambitions on something. Personally, I think the reason you're enthusiastic right now, Lisa, is because you have a book. You have something to put your energy towards. And when people don't have anything to put their energy towards, a relationship, a purpose, or even how do I deal with being alone, like utterly alone, right? Like I don't have family. I don't have a partner. I'm single right now, right? And it's interesting that I'm alone, and I'm a guy who's openly been in recovery for many, many years, and I feel pretty good right now. I mean, I don't feel great, but I feel pretty good, and I spend a lot of my day talking to people that struggle with addictions. I mean, several hours a day I'm interacting or engaging with people that are struggling with addiction and seeing people losing their shit. And really, which I've talked about, is a couple of friends, that I have had partners that have tried to commit suicide in the last now 3 weeks now. And what I'm noticing is the people that actually can find a place everyone's been uprooted. And if you can put your roots into a pot that feels like there's something there, then there's a semblance of you have some ability to manage or control your life, even with the difficulty. But if people are just running around like raw nerve endings and they don't know where to go, they're kind of losing it. And I think there's a lot to be said without overstating it, that if you're meant for more and you sat down and say, what am I meant for? Or if I was meant for more, what would that be? And you use like our friend Keith Cunningham's thinking time exercise. And if everyone got like a notepad, not even a computer, a piece of paper and said, what am I meant for? What do I really feel like I'm put on this planet? And just brainstorm and pick something, especially if you're like, what do? I don't know what to do. I don't know where to turn. Who are you meant for? To use the Dan Sullivan thing. Who do you want to be a hero to? Some people think, I should be in this business or I should be doing this. But going back to the 8 profit activators, which me and Dean have been, for over a decade now doing I Love Marketing episodes, we have these 8 profit activators that are all based on something that Dean created, the before unit, the during unit, and the after unit of a business. That the first thing is select a single target market. And if you can't figure out what to do, then the question is, well, who do you want to be a hero to? Who's that target market? What do they want? What are they looking for? Because, you've constructed a whole methodology and a system on how to sell that. If people can't bring themselves out of that resistance, though, they just they're running around like in their head with like, what the hell do I do? And so I think there's a deeper conversation with when you're worried, when you're scared, when you're fearful, when you're confused, how do you actually find confidence or courage or strength in all of it in order to still forge ahead when things seem insurmountable? And I'd almost like to hear your guys' perspective on that, because the people that already have a business, that already know what they're selling, they're having to pivot. Everyone's hearing everyone talk about pivot, but the people out there that are fucking lost, like they're really fucking lost. And if we could just give them a lighthouse, to use our friend Abby, she was talking about, like, what would that be? I'd love to hear you guys talk about that, because that in if you think of Meant for More, that's what it's all about. I think we're all engaged in doing this because we have ambitions. We're able to do something, and we've been able to reach out, but I think a lot of people are stuck right now. And I'd like to help them through that stuckness to whatever degree we can do that on an I Love Marketing podcast.
Well, there's so many different frameworks people can choose from. And I think sometimes there's just a divine appointment of the one that gets put in your face when you're in the need. Right.
Right.
And, I'm certainly lit up because I have a book to bring out, but I'm more lit up because inside it is like what you're saying. It's a place to start. I think people have the feeling, but they don't know what to do with it. I want to help more. I want to take this thing that maybe I've helped some people in my inner circle and help people beyond. I want to be a hero to not just my kids, but all kids dealing with XYZ, or, women or families or, people in financial distress. So I love that side door, instead of the what, like figure out who you want to be a hero to.
Something that you said, Hal, reminded me, there's a book called Overachievement. And one of the things that all sort of overachievers share in this guy's observation is something that he called irrational confidence. And I thought when you were talking about you're just knowing that you're going to beat this, that you're going to come back, you're going to walk, you're going to be, just being so optimistic and happy. It was irrational in everybody's view that you were that. But I think there's something to that's all part of it,
Yeah, I think, Dean, that's a really interesting point. And I think that it's true, and why the doctors were going like, he's irrational, he's delusional, this doesn't make sense. And for me, I call that unwavering faith, right? And I think that's really two different ways of looking at a very similar thing. And it's unwavering faith as a decided upon strategy. Yeah. Right? Meaning, if you take like the world's like Michael Jordan, I grew up watching Michael Jordan. He had an irrational confidence, an unwavering faith that he could make every shot that he took. And this is true for the best athletes in the world. They believe they're going to make every shot that they take, even though now that's a decided strategy to increase their success rate, because the odds aren't no one makes every shot they take, right?
Yeah. But who's to say how much confidence is rational either? Yeah. That's the funny thing, right? If you're going to think, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. There's no like set thing in stone that it's half and half, and you've got to kind of deal with that. So if you're going to err on the side of being 100% unwavering, like you said, in one direction, why not err 100% in the direction of confidence that you're going to recover, that you're going to get through this, that you're going to be better than ever?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there's an important piece to this, and it's acceptance. It's expecting the best and accepting the rest. And that's where people struggle with that irrational confidence or unwavering faith, is as human beings, we crave certainty. And so when people lack certainty, like if you're given a diagnosis, as grim as I was, that there's a 30% survival rate, so 70% you're going to die rate. Yeah. And I think most people go, well, it's this fear of failure. Like, what if I put my faith in what I want, but I don't really know if it's going to happen, so that they feel like they can't actually invest that full unwavering faith and confidence. But you have to realize it's a strategy that increases your likelihood of success. So you expect there is no other option that I'm going to beat this cancer and live to be 100. There's no other option that I'm going to sell 1 million copies of this book. There's no other option that I'm going to, that I'm going to, whatever it is in your life that you want to accomplish. But you simultaneously accept it may or may not happen. I'm not attached to the outcome. And when I was told I would never walk again, it was, I will walk again. There's no other option, while simultaneously knowing that I might never walk again. And I was at peace with that. Right. So it's this interesting kind of, balance between acceptance and faith.
Preference is the word. I did with Homer McDonald when we did Stop Your Divorce. One of the things that he said people have to let go of in order, even under seemingly impossible odds that their spouse is ever going to come back, they have to get out of this thing that they need them to come back, or that they would be devastated if they don't. Once they get to a position that it's a preference, I would prefer if they come back, but I'm going to be fine if they don't. It's it's an interesting shift in our minds there.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting too, and Anna, I want to ask you, because like in our book, even the Miracle Morning for Addiction Recovery, which all of you need to buy immediately if you've not got it. I know a lot of you have already gotten this book that follow us. The biochemical aspect of addiction, where your brain is not working, what you described, how with just being in that state. I mean, that's the thing with disease. That's the thing with addiction. That's the thing with depression and anxiety. I mean, you don't have happy chemicals flowing through, and then when you got off the chemo, that substance, that changed. One of the things I think about in addiction, and I'm relating it here, is that hope heals. And a lot of times if someone goes to a 12-step group, they are hopeless, and that's they're just looking, they're desperate, right? They're in a place where they're looking for people or anything that they can give them some sort of faith. And so when you say unwavering faith, when you lose that, when you don't have it, being able to reach outside of yourself, being able to find, if you're lucky, someone will show up. Other times you have to put yourself in the position to where you find people that will believe in you more than you believe in yourself. And so that's why we talk about, even in the book, things about volunteering, finding people that are in a worse place than you are, because there's always someone that needs help. And that if you can ever get yourself in that point, in a very interesting way, it helps pull you out of that darkness.
And if you haven't bought it already yet, then get off your ass and buy the book, all right? In chapter 4, you talk about the superhero formula. So what is it, and how can people use it to change their life?
Yeah. The superhero formula is really just a way of you identifying with who you are at your core. I mean, everybody is, in your DNA, you are a warrior. In your DNA, you have everything it takes to be successful. And for most people, really knowing who they are at the core is the essence of, it's sort of the best part of the work that we do, is us reintroducing people to who they are. So sometimes they actually have the audacity to stand on a stage and look at people and go, I don't know you by name or never met you before, but I know more about you than you know about yourself. And people look at you like, what? What are you talking about? I go, I know you better than you know yourself, because you are a superhero. You have the capacity to do superhuman things with your life. But what's it going to take for you to live into that? And then we sort of reverse engineer the recipe of what it would take to get past the obstacles that they think are obstacles, that aren't even obstacles to begin with.
Yeah.
And I'll say to them, isn't there something that somebody could come up to you with a problem? Everybody's great at giving advice to other people, right?
Oh, aren't they?
They're experts at that, right? And somebody comes up to you with a problem, and you go, oh, this is what you do. Fix it. There's 3 things and done. You're good. I don't even know what you're thinking about. Like, why is that an issue? And then you think about, right now, what's one challenge that you're facing in your life that you're having the hardest time with? And isn't it true that there'll be somebody else that could walk up to you and go, just do these 3 things and you're good to go, you're done. Right? And I think that's the point, is that we cannot really see ourselves. It's the most challenging thing to see our own blind spots.
Totally. Which is why it's so important, in my opinion, to have great sounding boards and what I call a genius network. I have a company called Genius Network, but I think of a group of people that just have immense wisdom and capabilities and that you can tap into. So who are your friends? I mean, who are people that you hang out with?
Can I plus that just for a second? Because it's like there's 3 things that we talk about in the book that you got to get stakeholders. You got to know who's a stakeholder in your success. Who's going to be impacted by you being successful, or maybe who's going to be impacted by you not being. Like, your kids. They're a great leverage point. You used the word leverage earlier, right? I mean, they're great leverage, or your friends or your family or somebody you love, that you're supporting in some way. So who's the stakeholder? Who's a direct recipient of the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever that might be? Who are your mentors? Who are the people that you're modeling and looking to for guidance? And then who's the group that you're hanging around with that you call a mastermind group or genius network? That's perfect, because those are the people that can hold up the mirror, so you can see yourself more accurately, even more accurately.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's my big trick, is that I think any problem in the world can be solved with the right genius network, the way that, in the context that I think about it. So I just really constantly am thinking, okay, who do I want in my world? Because when there's shit that I don't know how to handle, or I don't know how to think about it, they know how to think about it, and they could offer me advice. And a lot of times, you can offer people suggestions, advice, counsel, whatever you want to call it, and then when you forget your own advice, they can feed it back to you and remind you of what you told them at some greater point in time, which is why I think it always makes sense that if someone's not going to pay you money, at least set it up so that you are adding an enhancement to their life, because that will always come back to you. Even if it doesn't come back directly from that person, the mere fact of putting it out there. I mean, one thing that I heard early on in my life is be nice to the people you meet on the way up. They're the same people you meet on the way down.
Yeah.
And if there's any relationship advice, and I've tons of relationship advice for people. As a matter of fact, I'm writing a book right now on how to connect with people. It's simply realizing that as you go through life, do not leave scorched earth. You are going to run into the same people. There are people that, when I was in my early 20s, it didn't occur to me then that I would be running into those people 25 years later, and I do. And some of these people are some of my dearest friends today because I wasn't an asshole. I really thought about reputation. I've never sold anything that I felt was not, that I would not want to sell to a close friend or a family member. And I think about that all the time. And if someone doesn't like what it is that I've sold, I will give them their money back, because I don't want anyone having a legitimate reason to say that this guy has not really cared about me and that sort of stuff. And I one of the things I've never talked with you about this. One of the ways that I gauge people is how are people that are more powerful treat people that are less powerful than them. Like if you're out, at dinner and there's a server or someone holds open a door, always say thank you. I mean, always be courteous. Always show that. Even if you're, having a crappy day. I mean, when people are doing things, just acknowledge them. And it's simple, and it adds so much sunshine to other people's lives because, a lot of people they're not doing well in life. And the more that you can, be a fountain versus a drain, the more that you're going to, just build your own network. And when your life is kind of, maybe you don't know what your purpose is yet, which more of a reason to read a book like Pivot. When you're not quite there, if you can at least tap into human kindness and acknowledgement and gratitude for everyone around you and the people that you encounter, that alone will give you a certain level of energy and a certain level of strength. And if you do that consistently, because one of the things that you're talking about is it's not some grand thing that you do. It's these constant little daily things that you do, and you keep doing those.
It's
and you
frequency.
Keep doing those. Yeah.
It's like you said, going to the gym.
Yeah.
You don't go to the gym and get a great workout and then leave and go, yeah, I'm set for life. Just like, it's the frequency that's the key.
Yeah.
And it is the little things that you do continuously. I mean, I'd say at this stage in my own business career, the biggest challenge is consistency.
Yeah.
It's just to maintain consistency, right? I don't know if that's the same for you, but
absolutely.
That's a differentiator. At a certain level in a company's success, what stops you from getting to that very next level or to that really higher level has to do with consistency.
Totally, and this will sound really funny to some people, but what a lot and I've worked to maintain relationships with people that I find very interesting, very capable, very smart, givers. I mean, most of my world is I do my best. If people show signs of being a taker, I get them out of my life as quickly as humanly possible. And what a lot of people misinterpret as genius is simply redundancy, where people have stuck with something over and over and over again, and they've just gotten really good at it. And if you do that, the world will view a lot of that as genius because you are good at it. And in some levels, I guess you could call it genius. People, like, they hear me talk about marketing and they're like, oh, you're a genius marketer. I'm like, when God was doling out brains, I got 98% of my brains to develop a marketing strategy and the other 2% on how to run the rest of my life. I mean, I just stuck with it. It's not that something someone couldn't do or someone couldn't learn. It's just it is consistency.
You ever read any Patrick Lencioni books?
No, I have not actually.
I recommend him to you.
I actually do have one at my office, and I've never read it.
Yeah, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is great, and The Advantage is also really great. And in The Advantage, he talks about that redundancy. and really for the purposes of, you're reiterating, especially the important things, and you think, and that is kind of the yakety yak that goes on in my head sometimes, is especially around things that have to do with our culture,
Right.
or what our mission is and stuff like that, is that, oh, people have heard this before, especially the executive team. How many times are you going to tell them the same thing? How many times are you going to build the pyramid and show them the structures to create an unstoppable team? They got to be able to repeat it chapter and verse, and the truth is, until you're redundant, until it gets to a point of redundancy, they probably can't repeat it. They can't teach it. And then ultimately, the worst thing that, the best thing that can happen is that it cascades. And what stops it from cascading is the little voice that says, oh, I said this before, or I'm
Right.
being redundant.
Right.
So I've stopped apologizing now for my redundancy, because I would start off, I'd say, hey, I'm going to go over this, and I apologize for being redundant, and that's my little Adam, right? The little insecure, and all the stuff that I work on in my own spiritual practice about not being, having everybody have to like me, or have everybody have to please,
Right.
have them all agree. Like, to me now, consensus is the enemy of great execution in a company.
That's good.
Trying to consensus build. But I spent 2 years, the first 2 years that I was in this position, trying to build consensus, and it was a fool's errand, and I was the fool.
Right. Oh, that's great. Well, thanks for sharing that. Well, that reminds me of the Covey line: "To know and not to do is not to know. To understand and not to do is not to understand." So a lot of times, people, when what you're hearing actually turns into an action, then you actually get it. But a lot of people have heard something and they can regurgitate it, but they don't live it at all. Okay, I hope you found that video awesome and useful. So if you want to get a free copy of my book, I want you to click here. And if you want to watch some more videos that'll be useful and awesome, click here. Go ahead. They're over here. Do it now. Come on. Thank you. Watch them.